Hello, I'm Edgar. I always thought family was supposed to have your back, until my sister framed me to my fiancé. I caught her in his room, but it was too late. She'd already planned the wedding reception for her big lie. But the truth? I crashed that reception, texts in hand, exposing the betrayal in front of everyone. And believe me, this is just the beginning. I had always been the invisible son in the family, the youngest, overshadowed by Vera, the golden child. She was everything I wasn't. Beautiful, charming, poised, and it didn't help that she had our father wrapped around her finger. As much as I tried to be seen, my efforts often felt like whispers drowned in a storm. At 32, I was still chasing after validation, trying to get that nod of approval from my father, Charles. For as long as I could remember, he had been the unwavering patriarch of our family. His decisions ruled the household, and my mother, Rose, was more of a passive observer. She was supportive, sure, but in the way that only the second in command can be. It was always Charles who made the calls, and I was always a step behind, just trying to fit into the mold they had built for me. I didn't mind it at first, or so I told myself. I convinced myself that I was okay with the role I played, the dependable, predictable one. But as I got older, it became harder to ignore the constant ache of being overlooked, the relentless frustration of never measuring up. Vera was the one everyone admired. Vera was the one everyone wanted to be. I could never escape that shadow, no matter how hard I tried. And now, as I was preparing to marry Sonia, the woman I believed to be the love of my life, it felt like the perfect opportunity to prove I was more than just the silent one in the family. It wasn't that I didn't love Sonia, she was everything I wanted in a partner. Beautiful, intelligent, and well-loved by the family. But still, there was a weight on my chest. A gnawing doubt that maybe, just maybe, something wasn't quite right. I pushed it aside, convincing myself it was just pre-wedding jitters. Sonia and I had been together for a few years, and I thought I knew everything about her. We had even talked about our future, our home, our children, the life we would build. And I never once questioned her sincerity, but then there was Vera. She always seemed to know how to worm her way into every corner of my life. She had this way about her, a charm that was impossible to ignore. She was beautiful, manipulative, and if I'm honest, a little dangerous. I had always tried to gain her approval, but she would never give me that satisfaction. I was content for the most part with how things were, that is, until one evening, everything changed. I was supposed to meet Sonia at her apartment for a quiet evening together before the chaos of the wedding preparations took over. I arrived early, hoping to surprise her, maybe bring some flowers, make the evening a little more special. But what I found when I entered her apartment wasn't anything close to what I had expected. There they were, Sonia and Vera, together, in a way that could only be described as intimate. The scene in front of me shattered everything. My whole life, the image I had carefully constructed in my mind, cracked open like glass underfoot. I froze. My legs felt like jelly, and I could barely breathe as I processed what I was seeing. Sonia, the woman I was about to marry, and my sister, my own flesh and blood, together. It didn't make sense. It couldn't. Then I saw the phone on the coffee table, open to a message between them. I didn't need to read the full conversation, but I did anyway. The words were clear. The affair was real. They had been lying to me, laughing behind my back, plotting their betrayal. The world around me started to spin as the truth hit me with the force of a tidal wave. My mind was racing, my thoughts a blur of shock and anger. I wanted to scream, to yell, to confront them right then and there, but something inside me stopped me. Maybe it was the years of suppressing my emotions, or maybe it was the realization that this moment, this betrayal, demanded a plan, one that would shatter their lives just as they had shattered mine. I stepped back from the scene, slowly closing the door behind me, as if to distance myself from the destruction unfolding inside. My pulse was pounding in my ears, and I could feel the rage building inside me. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing my pain. Not yet. Not in the way they would expect. As I stood there, my hands clenched into fists, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them now. I wasn't going to let my emotions dictate my actions. I would expose them, both of them, but on my terms. I would wait. I would gather everything, every bit of proof, and I would wait for the right moment to turn everything upside down. My thoughts raced as I calculated my next move. The wedding. It was in just a few days. It would be the perfect moment to expose them, to show everyone what they had done to me. The church was stunning, its high ceilings adorned with intricate details and stained glass windows casting vibrant, colorful patterns onto the floor. The air was heavy with anticipation, the wedding, the perfect union, the life I was supposed to have. Everything had been meticulously planned, from the floral arrangements to the guest list. It was meant to be the happiest day of my life, but today, it felt like a mask I couldn't wear anymore. I stood at the entrance of the church watching the guests file in, exchanging smiles and pleasantries. I could hear the soft murmur of conversations, the quiet rustling of dresses, the clinking of glasses. The world outside was oblivious to the storm that had been brewing inside me for days, ever since I discovered the affair between Sonia and Vera. I walked slowly down the aisle, my mind buzzing with everything that had happened, everything I had discovered. Sonia's smile when she saw me should have been a reassurance, but all I felt was a cold emptiness. I was calm, maybe even more than I should have been. But beneath the surface, a storm was raging. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to keep my composure. This wedding, this entire day, was about to be turned upside down. I couldn't let it happen in a fit of rage. I had to stay composed, to expose the truth in the way I knew would hurt the most. The wedding was perfect, at least on the outside. Guests were seated, chatting and laughing. My mother, Rose, was sitting in the front row, blissfully unaware of the catastrophe that was coming. She looked so happy, so proud of me. I wanted to tell her, I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I had to keep everything under control. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about showing everyone who Vera and Sonia really were. I spotted Vera standing near the front, surrounded by her usual group of admirers. She looked so poised, so in control. Her presence was magnetic, and she was playing her role to perfection. If she had any idea of what was coming, she didn't show it. She was talking to the guests, smiling, laughing, just like she always did. But the rage building inside me was palpable. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve to get away with it. Sonia, on the other hand, was still at the altar, her back turned to me as she focused on the priest. She looked like the perfect bride, dressed in white, her face glowing with excitement. She kissed me on the cheek as I took my place beside her and whispered sweet things about our future, things I once believed without question. But now, I could see it all clearly. She had been the mastermind, the one who had orchestrated this betrayal. How could I have been so blind? The pain, the anger, the confusion, it was all swirling inside me like a storm that refused to calm. The ceremony began, and everything was moving in slow motion. I could feel the weight of every step, every word, every glance exchanged. I was prepared. I had everything set in place. The QR code cards that would expose the truth to everyone, the photos, the texts, everything. The wedding coordinator, Janet, started passing out the QR code cards to the guests as I had planned. I watched as people took the cards, some with a smile, some without even looking. But I knew what was about to happen. The truth was about to be unleashed, and nothing could stop it now. My pulse quickened as I saw the first guests begin to scan the QR codes. Their faces changed instantly, confusion spreading across the room. Whispers started to ripple through the congregation, and I could feel the tension building. I had carefully planned every detail of this moment, but now that it was happening, part of me wished I could stop it. The hurt was so raw, so painful, and yet there was something cathartic about seeing the truth spread like wildfire. I watched as Sonia's face slowly turned pale. She was frozen, staring at the phones of the guests around her, unable to look away. The secret she had worked so hard to keep hidden was out in the open for everyone to see. And there was Vera, sitting among the guests, trying to maintain her composure. I stepped out of the church, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The sun was hidden behind a thick layer of clouds, as if the world itself had decided to mourn the chaos I had unleashed. My footsteps echoed on the cold pavement, each one a reminder of what I'd just done. The wedding I had walked into with a sense of calm determination had just turned into a battleground. And now, I was free. Free of the lies, the false smiles, the betrayal. But that freedom didn't feel like it should have. There was a hollow ache in my chest that made me question everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and family. I had exposed the truth. I had done what I set out to do, but at what cost? My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my spiraling thoughts. It was Alex. I took a breath, trying to calm myself before answering. "Edgar?" Alex's voice crackled through the phone. Are you okay? I saw I saw what happened. I paused. How could I explain? How could I put into words the mess I had just walked away from? The years of lies, the betrayal that cut deeper than any wound I had ever known. It felt like I was suffocating. I don't know, I said finally, my voice flat. I just walked away from everything. It's all over now. The truth is out. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Alex wasn't sure what to say, and honestly, neither was I. I wasn't sure what to do with myself now. I didn't think I'd feel this empty, I admitted. I thought exposing them would make me feel better, but I just feel lost. Take it one step at a time, Alex said quietly. You did what you needed to do. You're not alone in this. I didn't answer. I was alone. I hung up, shoving the phone back into my pocket. I couldn't deal with more words right now. Inside the church, everything had erupted. Whispers filled the air like a swarm of bees. People were still staring at their phones, their faces twisted in shock and disbelief. But what about Sonia? I couldn't imagine how she was feeling right now. How could she stand there in front of everyone, knowing that everything was falling apart? I had no sympathy left for her. She had chosen this. She had chosen to betray me with my own sister. What was the price of love when it turned into betrayal? Back inside the church, Sonia was sitting, her face tear-streaked, her eyes unfocused. Her gown, once a symbol of purity and innocence, now felt like a costume, one that she couldn't remove. The perfect bride had become a shattered woman, her world collapsing in front of the very people who had once adored her. She couldn't speak. There were no words. Rose, her mother, was there beside her, trying to comfort her in vain. I could hear their voices as I stood just outside, waiting. I could almost picture Sonia's sobs, her face buried in her hands, the weight of guilt and shame pressing down on her. I don't know how this happened, Sonia cried. I didn't mean for this to happen, I swear. What do I do now? Rose's voice, comforting yet empty, tried to reassure her. We'll get through this, Sonia. I'm here. You're not alone. But the words felt hollow. There was no getting through this. Not for Sonia, not for Vera, not for any of us. Rose's efforts to comfort her daughter were futile. Sonia wasn't the woman Rose had known, and she could no longer pretend that things could go back to the way they were. Sonia had lost everything, the man who loved her, the family who trusted her, and now it was all laid bare for everyone to see. In the meantime, my phone buzzed again. I didn't even have to look to know who it was. It was Charles. I didn't answer. I wouldn't, not today. But that didn't stop him from trying. The cold air bit at my skin as I walked down the street, the events of the wedding still burning in my mind. I had just shattered everything I once believed in, and now I had to face the aftermath. But there was one thing left to do. I needed to confront Sonia. I couldn't run away from it any longer. I had hoped at some point that things could work out. Maybe it was foolish, but the idea of reconciliation, of finding a way to repair the damage, was still lingering in my mind. After all, she was the woman I had planned to marry, the woman I thought was the love of my life. But that was before I knew the truth. I drove to the cafe we had frequented in the early days of our relationship. It used to be a place where we laughed and talked about the future. It had been a symbol of everything that was supposed to be. Now, it was just another broken piece of the past. I sat at a corner table, watching the door. It didn't take long before Sonia arrived, her eyes swollen from crying. She hesitated before sitting down across from me, her hands shaking as she fidgeted with the napkin in front of her. "Edgar, I'm so sorry," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." I could feel the anger rising in my chest, but I kept it under control. I wasn't about to let her off that easily. "You didn't mean for it to get this far?" I asked, my voice icy. "You betrayed me, Sonia. You lied. You made me look like a fool in front of everyone. And now you want me to believe you didn't mean it?" She winced at my words, but she didn't look away. I know I hurt you. I was lost, Edgar. I was trapped in my own insecurities, and I didn't know how to fix it. I never wanted to hurt you." Her words hit me like a slap to the face. I could see the pain in her eyes, the guilt, but it didn't change the fact that she had destroyed everything. I took a deep breath, trying to hold myself together, but the rawness of her confession cut through me. "I trusted you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I thought you were different. I thought you were the one person who would never do this to me. I never wanted to hurt you, she repeated, her voice breaking. I swear I never wanted it to go this far. I couldn't hold back any longer. But it did, I spat. It went this far, Sonia. You took something sacred and turned it into a joke, and now there's nothing left but the wreckage. I stood up, unable to sit there any longer. The pain of it all was too much. You don't get to apologize your way out of this, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. I'm done. This is over. She stood as well, her hands reaching out to me. Edgar, please. But I shook my head. No, Sonia. It's too late for apologies. You've taken everything from me, and now it's time to move on. I turned and walked out of the cafe, not looking back. As I stepped into the cold night air, I felt a strange sense of finality wash over me. It was over. I had confronted the truth, faced it head on, and now I had to deal with the consequences. I didn't know where to go next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to let Sonia or anyone else dictate my future. I had spent too long being the victim. It was time to take control. Back at the church, the fallout was already beginning. I could hear the whispers, feel the judgment in the air. I could almost see my family's disappointment, their eyes full of confusion and anger. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know what I had just uncovered. I thought about Vera, my sister, the one who had helped shatter everything. I hadn't confronted her yet, but I knew that would come soon enough. This wasn't just about Sonia. It was about the whole damn family, the lies, the manipulation, the power plays. They had all been part of this ugly game, and now they would all have to face the consequences. I didn't want to be caught up in their world anymore. I didn't want to live in the shadow of their expectations and deceit. It was time to make my own way. But as the moment had come, as I sat in my apartment staring at the pile of evidence on the table, texts, photos, conversations, I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. The truth I had fought so long to expose was now in my hands. But with that truth came a flood of emotions, betrayal, rage, but also a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't a victim anymore. I had the power to change everything. It was time to confront Sonia. It wasn't just about revealing the affair anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. The man I used to be, the one who let the lies fester and ruin him, was gone. And in his place was someone who wasn't afraid to stand up for what was right. I glanced at my phone. The idea of calling her filled me with dread, but it was necessary. She had to hear the truth from me. No more avoiding it. No more pretending. I had waited long enough. The betrayal had hurt me, twisted me into someone I no longer recognized. But now I was stronger. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. Each ring felt like a drumbeat in my chest, the anticipation building. When she finally picked up, I didn't wait for pleasantries. Sonia, I started, my voice steady but cold. We need to talk. I'm done with the lies. It's time for the truth to come out. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear the hesitation in her breath. She wasn't expecting this, but she knew it was coming. I'm meeting the family today, I continued. And I'm bringing the truth with me. No more hiding. No more pretending. Edgar, please, she said, her voice weak. I didn't want this to happen. I never meant to hurt you. I couldn't help it. The anger flared up again, hot and fierce. You think this is about what you wanted? You think you had a right to do this to me? I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my tone. You used me. You used my love like it was some kind of game. She was quiet for a moment, but I could tell she was struggling with her own guilt. I never wanted to hurt you, she said again, but I knew it was too late for apologies. I'm done, Sonia. I'm done with the lies and the games. I'm walking into that room today, and I'm going to expose everything. Your lies will end today. I hung up the phone, the finality of my decision sinking in. My hands were trembling, but I knew I couldn't back down now. The damage had been done, but this was my chance to take back control. The family gathering was at the venue, the same place we had celebrated holidays, birthdays, and milestones together. The irony wasn't lost on me. This would be the place where the truth finally came to light. As I entered the venue, I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on me, but I kept my gaze forward, steady, focused. I could see Sonia out of the corner of my eye, but I didn't look at her, not yet. The room was full of family and friends, people who had no idea what was about to unfold. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Some of the family members seemed nervous, their glances darting between me and Sonia. Others were oblivious, still wrapped up in the facade of a perfect family gathering. But not for long. Sonia watched me from across the room, her eyes flicking nervously as I walked past her. The walls of the room seemed to close in on me, but I kept moving forward. I had come too far to turn back now. I stayed silent, just as I had planned. Every step I took was calculated. My silence was louder than any words could be. And slowly, the murmurs of the room grew, people beginning to feel the tension that had been building between us. Finally, after what felt like hours, I knew it was time. I stood up and made my way to the center of the room where the family was gathered. Everyone turned to look at me, and for the first time, I could feel their eyes on me, really on me. The silence was deafening. I took a deep breath and began. "There's something I need to share with all of you," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet. "For far too long, I've let the lies continue, pretending that everything was fine. But today, that ends." I could see Sonia shift uncomfortably, her face paling as I pulled out my phone and showed them the evidence. The room fell silent as they saw the photos, the texts, everything. Sonia's face twisted in shock as she tried to— I had come to a point where there was no turning back. Every moment of doubt, every flicker of hesitation faded away as I sat at my desk, reviewing the evidence one last time. The photos, the text, the video, all of it. I had everything I needed to expose Sonia and the rest of the family for what they truly were. The truth was now in my hands, ready to be unleashed. The video was the final piece, a recording of a conversation between Sonia and a key family member, the one who had helped her hide the affair. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about taking control. It was about showing everyone what had really been happening behind closed doors. I didn't feel powerful yet, but I would. Soon, I watched the video again, feeling my blood boil as I listened to the lies, the manipulation, the gaslighting. It was all there, and soon everyone else would see it too. But what would it cost me? Exposing the truth meant ripping apart what was left of my family. And while part of me craved the justice, another part of me feared the fallout. The consequences were weighing on me. Would I lose everything? The family I had known, the woman I had loved? Was it worth it? But I knew I couldn't carry this burden anymore. The secret had grown too heavy. It was time to let it go. I reached for my phone and called the family, arranging a meeting under the guise of a simple family gathering. They would think it was just another dinner, another charade to keep up appearances, but I wasn't playing the role anymore. This would be my final act. The truth would break everything open. When the day arrived, I could feel the tension in my chest, each breath heavier than the last. I stood in front of the mirror, trying to steady myself. I wasn't afraid of what I was about to do. No, I was angry, furious. But beneath that, I felt a cold sense of resolve. There was no other way. I had to expose the lies. I arrived at the venue first, and as the family trickled in, I could feel their unease. Some tried to act normal, others cast me furtive glances, but none of them knew what was coming. I couldn't help but watch them as they came in, their eyes flicking nervously around, unsure of what I was planning. They were all playing their parts, but I had stopped caring about their games. Sonia walked in, and I saw her eyes immediately lock onto mine. She was trying to stay composed, but it wasn't working. She knew what was coming. I could see it in the way her shoulders tensed, in the way her fingers gripped the doorframe as she entered. She tried to look confident, but the truth had a way of making even the strongest facade crack. I said nothing. I simply watched her. And as the family settled, I stood in front of my mirror taking a long, hard look at the man who had gotten himself to this point. It wasn't the same person I had been a year ago or even 6 months ago. The man looking back at me was scarred, sure, but he was stronger. The anger, the betrayal, the pain, they were all building up, like a force of nature inside me. But it wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. I was no longer the victim. I was in control. It had been days since the family confrontation, and the weight of the truth still hung over me. I was still processing it all. The last few weeks had been a blur of emotions, confusion, and more lies than I could stomach. But now, there was no turning back. The final piece was in place. A video recording of Sonia and a family member conspiring against me. It wasn't just a betrayal anymore. It was a conspiracy, A well-calculated plan that had been put into motion long before I had any clue. I picked up my phone and replayed the video one more time, my fingers trembling slightly. The conversation was damning, undeniable. They had thought they were invincible, that they could keep me in the dark forever. Well, I wasn't going to let that happen. Not anymore. The reality of what I was about to do hit me like a wave. I could feel the tension in my body, but it was a tension I knew I had to ride. Sonia had tried to manipulate me for the last time. She had tried to convince me that we could start fresh, that she would make things right. But her words were nothing more than a shield to protect her. I wasn't buying it anymore. I sent the invitations. A family gathering, just like the last one. But this time, I wasn't playing the role of the clueless victim. This was my turn to take control, and I would expose the lies once and for all. The day of the gathering, my heart was pounding in my chest. I kept reminding myself that this was it, the moment I had been preparing for. My future was waiting on the other side, but it wasn't going to be easy. Sonia, my father, and the rest of the family, none of them knew what was coming, and I wasn't going to give them a heads up. They needed to face the consequences of their actions, all of them. I arrived at the venue early, standing alone in the entryway. As the family trickled in, I watched their faces. Some of them greeted me warmly, unaware of what was about to unfold. Others gave me curious glances, the same way someone would eye a ticking bomb and wonder when it would explode. Sonia walked in last, her steps slow but deliberate. She tried to keep her composure, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew something was coming. She knew it was too late to fix things. Everyone sat down, some in silence, some exchanging nervous glances. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, but I kept my face blank, my expression calm. The time had come. I pulled out my phone and hit play on the video. The recording filled the room with the damning words I had been holding on to for so long. Sonia, speaking in hushed tones, conspiring with another family member, lying to me, lying to everyone. As the conversation played, I could see the horror on their faces. It was like a collective breath had been sucked from the room, leaving nothing but stunned silence. Sonia's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing in vain. She stammered, tried to deny it, but the truth was already there, out in the open. The family member who had been complicit in the scheme didn't even bother to speak. They just sat there, frozen. Sonia's defense was weak, desperate, and pathetic. She tried to twist the situation to frame herself as the victim, but there was no way out. The evidence was irrefutable. "I was just trying to protect you," she said, her voice cracking, but it was too late. The manipulation had gone too far. I watched as she crumbled, knowing there was nothing left for her to hold on to. The family was torn. Some were angry. The morning sun didn't feel like it used to. It didn't bring that warmth, that light I'd once looked forward to. Instead, it felt like it was just another day in a life that had become a tangled mess of lies, deceit, and broken promises. But today was different. Today was the day I would finally stand up for myself, once and for all. I spent the last few days planning my next move. It wasn't about revenge anymore. I wasn't out for that kind of satisfaction. This was about freedom. The kind that only comes when you break the chains that have been holding you back your entire life. I had to do this. For me. The confrontation I had been preparing for had been building for months, but I knew deep down it would come down to this. The final showdown. I had the proof. I had everything I needed to make sure the truth was undeniable. The video, the documents, the words of betrayal I had been keeping locked inside me for so long. Today, I would expose it all. No more half-truths, no more manipulation. My heart was steady, my mind clear, but there was a strange heaviness in my chest. It wasn't fear exactly, it was the realization that this was the last step. There would be no going back once I opened this door. Once the truth was out, there was no way to take it back. The pieces of my family, the ones that had once meant everything to me, would shatter. And no matter how much it hurt, that's what I had to do. For me, for my future. I glanced at the clock. It was time. I had invited them all for one final family gathering, the kind where we would talk, settle things, and supposedly heal. But I wasn't interested in healing anymore. I was interested in the truth. And today I was going to show them just how much they had betrayed me. I'd told myself I'd be calm, collected, but inside I was boiling. Sonia would be there, of course. She was the architect of this betrayal, and now she would be the one to face it. And my father, too, my own flesh and blood. All of them, watching as I revealed their lies. When I opened the door to greet them, I felt the weight of their gazes, some curious, others nervous. The air in the room was thick with uncertainty. They knew something was off, but not a single one of them knew how deep the hole they had dug really was. Sonia entered last, wearing her usual mask. I could see the tightness in her jaw, the nervous flicker in her eyes. She thought she had me figured out, but she didn't. Not anymore. Once everyone was seated, the moment came. I wasn't going to drag it out. I stood, cleared my throat, and looked at each of them. "I've been silent long enough," I said, my voice steady. "I've been waiting for the right time, and I realize now it's never going to come. I have nothing left to lose, and neither do any of you." I pulled out my phone, hit play on the video. The words Sonia had spoken in private, the things she and a family member had planned, filled the room. The truth spilled out louder than any words I could have said. Sonia's face drained of color. She didn't move. She couldn't. She could only stare at the evidence that was now undeniable. The family watched in stunned silence as I laid it all out. Everything they had done, the lies, the manipulation, the way they had tried to bury me. Sonia opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She tried to deny it at first, of course. She always did. But there was no escaping the truth. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I was trying to protect you from the truth." I laughed, bitter and cold. Protect me? By lying to me for years? I didn't need to hear her anymore. I knew the game, and I wasn't playing it anymore. The room erupted. Some of them tried to defend her. Others were too shocked to speak. My father stood up, red-faced, but he didn't know what to say either. The family was split, some backing Sonia, others looking at her with shame. It was chaos, but it was nothing compared to the turmoil I'd felt for all these years. I couldn't listen to any more of this. They couldn't see it. They wouldn't. It had been days since I walked away from my family, from the wreckage I left behind. There was a strange quiet in my life now, one I had never really known. A quiet that didn't come from being ignored or overlooked, but from my own mind finally settling into a new rhythm, a rhythm that was mine. The weight of my decisions, heavy as it had been, was starting to lift, but the emotional toll was still there, lingering in the corners of my mind. I spent the first couple of days in a haze. The confrontation was done, and I had finally broken free from everything that had bound me. But it didn't feel like relief right away. There was this ache, this emptiness that gnawed at me. I had cut ties, yes, but the scars were still fresh. The pain of realizing that the people who had shaped my life had never really been on my side. It was raw, it was new, and as much as I'd thought I had been ready for it, I wasn't. The memories of those years, the manipulation, the lies, the quiet betrayals, flooded back like an unstoppable current. They weren't just memories. They were wounds I'd been carrying, hidden under the surface, and now they had a voice. But as the days went on, I realized something. I didn't have to let those wounds define me. They didn't get to control me anymore. I took long walks through the streets, quiet, reflective walks. The world around me seemed so alive, so unbothered by the battles I'd just fought. But that was the key, wasn't it? The world kept moving. The only thing that mattered now was how I moved forward. The hardest part was facing what had happened. The destruction of my family and my ties to them. The fact that I would never sit down for dinner with them again, that I would never hear those familiar voices asking about my day, was something I wasn't sure I'd ever fully accept. But I also knew that I didn't want to go back. I wasn't going to allow myself to fall back into the trap of guilt and obligation. I had to rebuild, reclaim the parts of myself I'd lost over the years. So, I did what anyone who was serious about change would do. I started taking action. I enrolled in a course I had always wanted to take but never thought I'd have the time or the courage for. I began looking into job opportunities that weren't tied to the expectations of my family, ones that felt like they aligned with who I truly was, not who they had wanted me to be. It was liberating. For the first time, I wasn't doing things because I had to. I was doing them because I wanted to, and that was powerful. But the work didn't stop there. I knew that healing didn't come just from throwing myself into work or filling my time with distractions. It meant facing the scars, the deep-rooted trauma I had spent my life running from. I reached out for help. I started therapy. The first session was the hardest. Sitting there, talking to someone who didn't know my family, who didn't know the weight I carried, felt almost impossible. But I stayed. I kept showing up. And slowly, the layers of resentment and sadness began to peel back. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was learning how to heal. Through therapy, I came to understand something that had always eluded me. Forgiveness didn't mean I had to reconcile. It didn't mean I had to go back to them, to be part of the dysfunction that had always been there. Forgiveness, for me, meant letting go. It meant reclaiming control over my own emotions and decisions. And for the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Not because everything was perfect, far from it, but because I was choosing to move forward. I was no longer shackled by the ghosts of my past. I also reconnected with old friends, people who had been there for me before I was swallowed by the toxic family dynamic. Slowly, I built a new social circle, one that wasn't steeped in guilt or obligation. These were real, genuine relationships. I had a support system, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I felt like I belonged somewhere, without the baggage. The more I worked on myself, the more I realized that I had been